Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well and welcome to a very special video because today I'm going to be diving into my thoughts, my feelings, my reaction to the opening ceremony of the 2024 Olympics, which of course are being held in Paris. Yes, I'm going to be diving into my thoughts on last night's opening ceremony, and I know that this is a little bit out of the box. It's a little bit off the beaten path for this channel. It is of course called Jean's Movie Chat, so like what am I doing talking about a sporting event? Well, the thing is, little fun fact about me, I actually have this beloved tradition of watching the Olympics ceremony each and every time that they are aired. I really love diving into the history of the Olympics, and I really get excited about it, especially leading up to the opening ceremony. I won't claim to be the biggest fan of the sporting events. Like I don't really care about all of that, to be honest. Like, it's not really that deep to me, but the opening and closing ceremonies are the parts that I get really excited about. So I'm really excited to share my thoughts on last night's opening ceremony with you guys, and if that sounds fun to you, then of course stay tuned. And as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Like I said, I don't usually talk about sports. Like I don't usually talk about tennis or football, but I do make an exception when it's the Olympics, apparently. I mean, this is the very first Olympics related video on my channel, so yeah, I'm excited to dive into it. And be sure to stay tuned until the very end because I am going to be giving you guys my ranking of the best Olympic opening ceremonies of the 21st century. There isn't much footage beyond that. Some of the footage is like rusty, dusty, musty, so I haven't really delved into pre-2000s era Olympics, but from 2000 onwards I'm going to be ranking my favorite opening ceremonies, so stay tuned for that. Now without further ado though, let's get into this. So as I said, I'm a huge fan of the Olympics opening ceremonies, and this all started somewhat predictably with the 2012 London Olympics. Oh, what a time to be alive, especially as a Londoner. I remember them like they were yesterday. It was such an incredible time. The city was buzzing, and I happened to live not too far away from Stratford, which was where the Olympics were taking place, and so I really felt like I was at the center of the action. And seeing the gentrification that took place a couple of years prior to the Olympics actually happening, I mean, that whole transformation was really a key turning point in my life that had such a huge impact on me in various different ways, not least of all because it gave us the overground, the London Overground, which came to save our goddamn lives. So yeah, I have a direct experience to how the Olympics can really change cities for the best and also for the worst. I mean, it's a very complicated process, as many of you guys will know. There are ups and downs involved, but best believe in the days and the hours leading up to the opening ceremony, all of a sudden all of our woes disappear because we all feel a sense of excitement and joy and anticipation for the games. And I know that it's propaganda. I know that this is all about, you know, countries, especially the host countries, showing off their best selves for the rest of the world in this global political stage, and also for potential investors. I know all of that good stuff, but god damn it, if I don't feel all excited and hopeful for the future whenever I see one of the opening ceremonies, because it gets me each and every time, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm clearly coming into this with a little bit of bias because the London opening ceremony was honestly the stuff of dreams. Honestly, it was an incredible ceremony to behold. I felt so proud to be a Londoner, and so that's a pretty high bar in itself, and all of the other ceremonies that have come afterwards have had to kind of match that or surpass that, and you're about to find out whether I think they have. But before we get into all of that, let's dive into my thoughts on the Paris one. So first first of all, the first thing to note about the Paris opening ceremony is that they broke tradition in that instead of having the opening ceremony in a stadium or an arena, the way that we have seen throughout the history of the modern Olympics, they decided to have it take place all along the Seine River, which to me is just crazy, wacky, wild, but also genius. And it made for one of the most, if not the very most ambitious television broadcasts to have ever happened, literally in the history of television. Like, what if you watch the ceremony, all like 15 hours of it, then you know it was a sight to behold. All of those moving pieces, all of those projects, the performances, the little pre-recorded parts, there was even a whole mini animated film from Illumination Studios that took place in there. Like, all of those pieces coming together, plus you have the procession of boats with all of the teams on there, that all of that coming together was nothing short of a miracle, actually. And so that's what I want to start off with, a huge round of applause to Paris. Huge round of applause to the Paris Olympic Committee. They ate that. They literally ate that. They gobbled all, because it seems like it was an impossible feat. It was so incredibly ambitious, and I have nothing but awe. I have nothing but respect for that team and for the 45,000 volunteers that made this possible. Oh, standing ovation. I can't stand now, but standing ovation, because I truly have respect for the vision. Now, that's not to say that everything worked perfectly, because there were some hiccups along the way. But first of all, let's dive into the highlights, okay? So number one, we have the storytelling. I really love the fact that the opening ceremony was divvied up into, I think it was 12 chapters, these sort of principles that underline French culture. You had like égalité, fraternité, liberté, like all of the different chapters that the opening ceremony was divided into were all markers of French culture and history, and I thought that was a really clever way of doing that. And they sort of interpolated these pre-recorded productions alongside the live performances that were all thematically relevant to each of those chapters, and I thought that was a really nice structure for the ceremony to have. I do think that the London opening ceremony was sort of the pioneer for this kind of storytelling for the Olympics opening ceremonies, because as you'll recall, the London opening ceremony was like one of the first ones to introduce pre-recorded elements, like the James Bond video where he goes to Buckingham Palace with the Queen, and of course the Mr. Bean sequence, you know, running along the beach, the Chariots of Fire. So yeah, that was definitely something that the London ceremony introduced, but the Paris one really made a lot of use of. And I think it's a really clever way of creating an enjoyable and entertaining broadcast for not just people who are at the Seine, literally watching the live performances, but also those of us, a billion of us, a billion plus even, who are watching from home. So I thought that 12-act structure and incorporating those pre-recorded elements was really brilliantly done. There were some chapters that were stronger than others. I think the standout ones were like love, for instance. Oh, amour, the amour chapter with the ménage à trois, like that was a whole mood. And of course, liberté. Liberté was incredible because they tied into all of these different theatrical productions like Phantom of the Opera, Les Mis, of course. And then you had the torch bearer who was doing all sorts. We'll get onto them in a second. But they were kind of underground underneath the Seine, and they were holding the torch, and it was giving Phantom of the Opera. Then he emerged onto the stage where it was a Les Mis situation. You have that shot that pans out on the stage, and that's where you have Liberté. And then you dive into the live performance from that band who I'll name over here. I can't remember their name, but they were incredible. And the opera singer, oh my goodness, the opera singer was amazing. The fact that she was giving a live performance and we could hear her crystal clear through the television, through the sound waves, was magnifique. But of course, to top it all off, we have The beheaded Marie Antoinette. That's the kind of iconography that will make this ceremony so incredibly memorable and stand the test of time. Just the vision of that decapitated Marie Antoinette holding onto her own head and singing, like, mwah. It's a very classic theatrical trick, but it was so effective. And not to mention there were loads of them during the rock performance, and it was just beautifully put together. So I would say that that chapter in particular was one of the best, but overall I love the structure of this ceremony. Another highlight was of course the mystery torchbearer, who, yes, absolutely resembled the character from Assassin's Creed. But I found it interesting that there was never a face reveal. It's kind of cool, but I did expect there to be one at the end, and I thought that they would make it like an iconic French athlete, even though obviously they didn't really do all of that parkouring, but I thought that's what the storyline was going to go through. But no, in the end, the guy, or the person, the sort of French icon, went about their day, jumping through all of these Parisian houses and then diving underwater and then, you know, going on the metro. Like, they went on a whole adventure with that goddamn torch, but they managed to take it to the stadium safely, and that's all that matters. And yeah, it was a really fun character to follow along the journey, especially considering the kind of storytelling that they were doing throughout the ceremony. They were kind of our protagonists throughout the story, and it was quite effective. Next up, we have Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga! Now, some eagle-eyed viewers had already spotted Lady Gaga's piano on the riverbank just a couple of days ago as she was rehearsing, and it was of course confirmed that it was going to be her performing, and I thought she was really great. It was sort of a nod to cabaret, to burlesque. I believe her costuming was done by Christian Dior, so all of this is very, very French. And there were quite a few nods to that part of French culture across the ceremony, especially near the first half. But I thought Lady Gaga did a splendid job in her performance in a particularly tricky stage that was on the riverbank, probably really uneven and really scary to walk around in, especially in extremely high heels. So like, yeah. And there were of course a few different live performances across the river throughout the ceremony. I will say, out of all of the live performances that we got, my favorites were the ones that weren't actually taking place like on the river. Like the ones that were taking place elsewhere. We'll talk about it. Those are the ones that worked best for me. Like I said, you know, Lady Gaga was really struggling with the constraints of her stage, and I feel like if she was elsewhere, like at the Louvre or the Arc de Triomphe or wherever, it would have worked better for her. But I get it, you know, the whole Seine was the stage for the night, and so, you know, her being there made sense. It's just that overall, taking a look at how the night went, the best performances really were off the river. Apart from the performance of Imagine, which I think was done really, really well, with the fire, you know, set ablaze in the middle of the river. And of course, Imagine is a staple song in the Olympics. It of course symbolizes the plea for world peace, and it's been sung across various different Olympic ceremonies throughout the decades. And speaking of live performances, we need to talk about Aya. Oh my goodness, we need to talk about Aya Nakamura, because she was phenomenal last night. Like, she was incredible. I had the biggest smile on my face when I saw my sister out there, because what an honor and what a joy it is to see this incredibly successful Black French artist shine the way that she did in such a historically relevant event. Like, I was happy to see any Black talent be highlighted throughout the ceremony. Like, that always brought a smile to my face. But you know me, okay, you knew that was being the case. But Aya Nakamura just like nailed it. She killed it when she was singing Jaja. Oh my god. Oh my god. And the fact that the French army the fact that the French Republican Guard was literally her orchestra, melding together those different elements of modern French culture, I thought that was magnifique. I thought that was absolutely spectacular and so unexpected. You wouldn't wouldn't expect the French Republican Guard to play orchestra to Jaja. Like, you wouldn't expect that, but they actually melded those two very different things together so well. It made for a highlight of the night. And until the very end, until almost the very end of the ceremony, that was my favorite performance of the night. And speaking of phenomenal performances, we have to of course talk about the fashion show element of the night, which also incorporated some drag. Yes, we saw drag, French drag in particular, be highlighted in a big way during the latter chapters of the ceremony, and I think that is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, throughout the ceremony, you saw a lot of, different quirky modern elements of French culture be highlighted. It wasn't all of that kind of neoclassical, boring nonsense that we read about in textbooks. And it wasn't just about the French Revolution either. This ceremony offered up a really diverse mix of elements of French culture, modern 21st century French culture. And I think the fact that they decided to showcase that to the world, I mean, we're talking again, 1 billion plus people, is a huge deal. And the fact that drag was so prevalent in yesterday's ceremony is absolutely shocking, surprising, but also a welcome sight to behold. Now, of course, eagle-eyed viewers, and by eagle-eyed I mean drag race viewers, which, by the way, it's not lost on me that this aired on the same day as the season finale of All Stars 9, okay? But eagle-eyed viewers would have spotted our sister Nikki Doll front and center during the drag segment, and she even got to perform a little bit of her song, which I've been listening to all morning, okay? But it was just so phenomenal to see drag and queer culture be highlighted in this way. As I mentioned, you had that ménage à trois segment during the love chapter of the ceremony, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, especially if you want to highlight art and fashion and culture. Who are the purveyors of art and fashion and culture? Who are the contributors of this? Of course, it's the queer community. Of course, it's the people who are ostracized in society that are being creative, that are being innovative in these spaces. And so, of course, they deserve to be highlighted on the world stage. Now, with the way that I've been talking about the ceremony, you'd think it was just like a concert. Like, you'd think it was just like some kind of French exposition or something. But no, it was a sporting event. And so, of course, we had our sports stars, our athletes at the center of it all. And instead of having the regular parade that usually takes place in a stadium where everyone's walking with their flags, this time around, they were brought to the Olympics in style with their boats. Now, the boats were kind of trudging along the Seine River, and I thought this was really fun and creative. I have seen that people were critical of this decision. I thought that it was less impactful than the stadium parade. I don't know about that. Like, I actually I like the boats. I'm not saying that we should switch to the boats permanently. Like, this could be a cute little once in a generation thing. I don't mind. But the fact that Paris decided to think outside of the box and do something unique and different and largely successful in my eyes, I don't know. Like, I just have to applaud them, especially considering the logistics of this were truly a nightmare. Not least because the weather, which apparently was immaculate throughout the entirety of the week, ended up disappointing them in a big way in the last minute. Like, yeah, it rained the entire time, and it wasn't just like a cute little rain. It was like a pouring, old man snoring. Like, it was a mess. Everyone was soaked, including our British Prime Minister, who refused to put on that poncho, which, yes, did look a bit of a mess, but at least he would have been drier. Anyways, so yes, the athletes were paraded in via boats, and I thought that was really fun to watch. It was a bit different, a bit unique. It did mean, though, that the opening ceremony was kind of interpolated with the arrival of the teams, which is a bit different to the usual structure where they usually have a whole ceremony and then the teams come in at the end. But it forced me, at least, to watch it from start to finish, and I think ultimately that was a good thing because I got to appreciate more of the countries. I didn't want to leave and miss out on any live performances, so I was stuck to the TV for for like 17 hours. Like, it is what it is. Now, in terms of the teams that I was most excited to see, like, yeah, Team GB, you know, they got a little woo-woo for me. Although I was surprised at how small they were. Like, is it just me, or is like Team GB looking a bit tiny, looking a bit small in comparison to some of the other big dogs? But then, speaking of small teams, small but formidable, you also had DRC. I am, of course, from Congo, the Democratic Republic of, and so I was really excited to see my people them on the boat. Although again, it's a very small team, but Congo has troubles. Like, Congo has a lot to worry about, and so Olympics aren't exactly a priority, unfortunately. But I'm so glad that the country got some representation in this year's Olympics. And then a team that I was like truly shocked by, like I was literally bamboozled by, was États-Unis. The United States of America coming in, like, as many people have said, Washington crossing the Delaware River. That was insane. That was wild, with none other than LeBron James waving the flag. But I was like, what is going on? First of all, that boat looked like it was on the verge of collapse. That boat looked like it was about to be a Titanic situation, because why was it rocking like that? 600 athletes on that goddamn boat. I said, this cannot be. And in comparison to that, Team GB definitely looked tiny and minuscule. Like, the Americans have sent out hundreds of thousands of their best and brightest to compete in these Olympic Games. Like I said, it's all part of propaganda and whatever, but it's still very impressive to see so many incredible athletes populating that boat. Like, it was a sight to behold. And the fact that they were second to last, the fact that they didn't need to, because it was in alphabetical order, and États-Unis, which is the United States in French, would have been under E. It wasn't supposed to come second to last, but the fact that they got that slot was just like, okay, America, okay, settle down now. But they deserved it, because the team came through. Like, the team came out and showed up. And then, of course, you had the home team, France itself, coming in at the very end, and their boat was also pretty full. 500 plus athletes on there, looking incredible in their tricolor. It was a sight to behold. Now, before we get into the big one, before we get into the biggest moment of the night, to me, and to many people out there, I'm sure, let's talk about some other mini little highlights. First of all, the VFX. VFX team knocked it out of the park, from the French flag appearing from that bridge. You also had the incredible light work on the Tour Eiffel, just shining bright like a diamond. And my mum managed to spot the fact that the Eiffel Tower was lit up in the colours of the Olympic flag, which I thought was just magnifique. What a touch of brilliance. And that's what really struck me about the VFX throughout the ceremony, is that it was just so detail orientated, even from the appearance of the dove wings under each of the bridges as the mechanical horse Renee Beyonce's Renee, or at least Renee's cousin or something, the dove wings lit up as she made her way across the river, and that of course symbolizes the doves that were traditionally released during the opening ceremonies of the Olympics back in the day. And these days they just have a nod to that for the sake of not abusing any animals. But I thought that was an incredible nod, and that all crescendoed into the moment where Renee made her way up to the stage. But you saw that incredible shot where the final dove wings lit up on the Eiffel Tower, and then you have the Olympic rings on the Eiffel Tower, and it was just like a perfect symmetrical shot. Like, it was magnificent. Like, it was incredible. And again, it speaks to the level of attention to detail that the VFX team, special effects team, really committed to for this ceremony. I also love the way that the ceremony incorporated so many different historical landmarks across Paris. You of course had the Louvre be featured in that really wonderful pre-recorded scene where all of the paintings had their subjects missing and they were kind of running around, beautifully animated in that scratchy way. And then you of course had the Eiffel Tower be spotlighted in the most incredible way with that lightwork show at the end. But there were all of these different landmarks spotlighted throughout the ceremony, and it just made for such an incredible celebration of the city of Paris itself. I really do feel like the fact that it was set outside where you could see so much of the city, and it really focused on celebrating Paris as a city, was a good thing ultimately. Yes, there were definitely hiccups, which again we'll dive into in a second, and not to mention the weather being so disastrous certainly put a damper on things. But ultimately I'm really glad that they did it. Like, if anyone could do it, it would be Paris, and I think they knocked it out of the park. Which leads us, of course, to the very end, the incredible moment where we saw none other than Celine Dion. Celine Dion's performance on the Eiffel Tower. Guys, pay attention. Perfection. Truly perfection. Now, if you are a fan of Celine Dion, then you'll know that this year has really been her year. It's really been her moment. Earlier this year, we had her documentary, I Am Celine Dion, where she discussed her struggle, her fight with stiff person syndrome, which is an illness that she's had for many years, and it has really just destroyed her quality of life and prevented her from being able to perform. She hasn't performed publicly in several years, 4 or 5 I believe, but it was her passion, it was her dream to step on the stage once again and give a performance. And she even said, listen, I don't care what it takes, even if I have to crawl on that stage, I will make it happen. And she made it happen. Guys, she made it happen. She was the highlight of last night's ceremony. She absolutely killed it. She absolutely nailed it. Her voice was so majestic, so angelic, so clear. Her pronunciation of the French words was perfection. And yes, she is French Canadian, but like, French Canadians have a different accent. They have a very different accent, okay? But she sounded so crystal clear in her French as she was singing the song. And all I could do is round of applause for Celine Dion. What a way to end the ceremony. It was impeccable. And also shout out to the hair and makeup team. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was immaculate. The way that the smoky eye really made her eyes stand out was absolute perfection. And the dress, oh my god, the dress dripping in these beads and jewels. She looked outstanding. She looked like an angel. And then you had the Eiffel Tower matching her look. The Eiffel Tower glimmering in white as she shimmered in her dress. I mean, everything was just perfection, guys. Like, everything was just magnifique. Oh, what a way to end an already incredible ceremony. Okay, so now that I have sung and shouted the praises for the opening ceremony of the Paris 2024 Olympics, like I said, there were a couple of hiccups, and so it's time to dive into them. First of all, we have transport. The transport network buckled. The transport network absolutely fell to its knees yesterday. Many of you guys may not know this if you're not in Europe, but as a Londoner, we of course have a very easy access to Paris in the form of HS1, aka the Eurostar, and the Eurostar suffered some horrible damage yesterday in the form of arson, I think it was. But anyway, about a third of the planned routes to Paris were disrupted or cancelled yesterday, and so it was a disaster. It was literally a disaster. Before the ceremony even started, a bunch of people couldn't even make it, so that was catastrophe number 1. And then you also had issues with the metro within Paris itself, so much so that Zidane almost didn't make it. Literally, Zidane himself, who was carrying the torch at the time, almost didn't make it because the metro broke down on his way to the ceremony. Next, we of course had a couple of gaffes during the ceremony itself. The can-can dancers, yeah, that was tough to watch. We're not gonna lie. The can-can dancers clearly needed a couple more rounds of rehearsal. Now, there were some disruptions before the ceremony took place. I think there was like strikes or protests and stuff happening leading up to the Olympics. So perhaps that's what affected the dancers' abilities to rehearse beforehand. But yeah, it was pretty tough to watch that performance. Let's not lie. That wasn't a great showcase for French cabaret and burlesque, but we moved. And let's not forget, there was also some amazing dancing, especially during the kind of Eurovision section of the ceremony. So that was really great. And I think it didn't quite make us forget about the can-can dancers, but it softened the blow just a little bit. Now, we already talked about the rain, but that wasn't a human error. That was a divine error. Okay, we have to take that up to the skies themselves, okay, because that weather was appalling. That was horrific. And I feel so bad for the planners, for the participants, the volunteers, the performers who were out there in the rain for hours on end, because that's clearly not what they wanted. And the fact that throughout the entire week, Paris was having like incredible weather, and then Friday hit and all the rain came pouring down is just such a gut punch. Like, what the hell? What were the heavens thinking? And then of course you had the upside down Olympic flag. Yeah, that was that wasn't great. I did notice, by the way, as they were unfolding it, I was like, oh, but isn't that gonna be the other way around? But thankfully the cameraman just kind of panned away and focused on the choir because yeah, it was pretty embarrassing to have the Olympic flag be upside down during the Olympics opening ceremony. Like, that wasn't great. But so much else went right, so like we can't hate on them too much. Overall, considering how huge and ambitious and logistically impossible this ceremony was, I am in awe. I have so much respect for Paris and all of the organizers for pulling it off. I thought it was a triumph, a triumph to behold. I love the fact that they stepped outside of the box and decided to have it on the riverbank with all of the flaws and all of the issues that they faced. I thought it made for a really impactful and memorable opening ceremony that I think will stand the test of time. I think people will look back on this in a couple of years' time and be like, you know what? That was actually pretty awesome. That was actually pretty amazing. And was it weird? Was it wacky? Was it French? Absolutely. But I had the time of my life watching this from start to finish. And I will definitely have it on rotation when I rewatch all of the ceremonies for 2028. Okay, so now that we have dived into my thoughts on the opening ceremony for the 2024 Paris Olympics, it is of course time. It's time to do my ranking of the opening ceremonies from the 21st century. Like I said, I haven't really had a chance to watch the opening ceremonies prior to 2000 because a lot of them are rusty, dusty. The footage is a little bit shaky. Although I will say, shout out to the 1992 opening ceremony in Barcelona, which to this day has the best torch lighting that we have ever seen. That was, of course, with the archer that managed to shoot the arrow right into the torch and lit it up in the most spectacular way. That has yet to be beat, okay? I am aware of that clip, and I do still think that it's the one to beat when it comes to torch lightings. I did really like the hot air balloon in the Paris opening ceremony last night. I thought that was fun. I wish the balloon had been decorated though. I thought it looked a little bit plain, especially considering how much detailed work went into the rest of the ceremony. The balloon itself felt like a bit of an afterthought in comparison, but still really impressive stuff to have the Olympic torch hovering up in the air. I wonder if it's going to stay that way for the 16 days, who knows, but I still do think that the 92 Barcelona opening ceremony still remains the best torch lighting sequence. But when it comes to the 7 Olympic opening ceremonies on the 21st century, first one up at number 7, we have the Sydney opening ceremony. I thought it was cool. I thought it was really fun. It's a traditional opening ceremony that takes place in the stadium. We had some really standout athletes there as well, which was pretty cool. And I will say that the athletes really can help make the Olympics great. I think one of the reasons why many of us feel that the prime Olympic era was the 2008 to 2000 2016 era was because of huge stars like, of course, Usain Bolt. Those of us who were there remember just how huge Bolt was as a star, shining star of Olympic success. So clearly the athletes can definitely help create that vibe and excitement and atmosphere for the Olympics. And so Sydney definitely had that, but I think because it was a little bit further away and before my time, I'm not as attached to it as some of the other ones. But time isn't always a factor. Just because it was further back in history doesn't mean it has a less than favorable position necessarily, because next up at number 6 we have the 2020 Tokyo opening ceremony. Yikes. Like, just a big yikes. All I'll say about this one is I expected so much more. I wanted so much more. And it looked like we were going to get so much more, especially considering the closing ceremony of the Rio Olympics, which gave us a little hint as to what was to come. But unfortunately, Tokyo and of course the world was rocked by a little thing called the pandemic. And so it all went to crap. Not to mention the rumors of corruption and disappearing funds that helped create a very underwhelming opening ceremony for Tokyo, which is just devastating considering how much they had to work with. Like, it could have been phenomenal. It could have been amazing. My hopes were so high for Tokyo. Are you kidding? Japan, you want to talk about showcasing culture, you want to talk about history, technology, art, fashion. Like, Tokyo is one of the fashion capitals of the world. We could have had something insane. We could have had J-pop. It could have been phenomenal. Anime, oh my god. It literally could have blown my mind to pieces. But alas, it wasn't meant to be. Maybe next time in the near future we'll get another Tokyo hosted Olympics, but unfortunately this time around it was just a bit of a disappointment. There was some stuff there, but and also there was no audience. It wasn't great. It wasn't great at all. And then next up at number 5 we have 2016's Rio opening ceremony, the first ever Olympics to take place in South America, I believe. My hopes were sky high. My hopes were through the roof, okay? And unfortunately, I was let down just a little bit. I'm so sorry to my Brazilian gang, but the Rio opening ceremony just did not give what needed to be given. It was almost there. It was like 60% there. So not almost there, but I just, again, Rio and Brazil, the culture, the history, there was so much to work with. The way that they could have created a whole beach, the way that they could have created a whole carnival, it could have been insane. It could have been amazing. But alas, it was just lacking in that flavor, that memorability, that iconness. So yeah, unfortunately, the Rio opening ceremony let me down just a little bit. But it's still a significant jump from Tokyo. So let's make no mistake, Rio definitely put up a great effort. It just wasn't quite at the ranks of the top for the 21st century. And then next up at number 4, we have the 2004 Athens opening ceremony. I love this one. Truly, this is a jump. This is a jump right here. From number 5 to number 4, we've got a steep jump because I adore the Athens opening ceremony. As someone who really loves Greco-Roman mythology, who really loves diving into classical literature and the history, the prehistory of the Olympics, I thought this was absolutely amazing. What an ode to the beginnings, the genesis of the Olympics in ancient Greece. They did a phenomenal job of highlighting that and bringing us across the centuries, across the millennia of Greek history. I loved the setup of this circular parade going around the actual stadium. I loved the way that they had these performers, these actors and dancers kind of contorting themselves to look like ancient Greek art and pottery and statues. The hair and makeup department was doing their thing for the 2004 opening ceremony, okay? But I really loved all of it. As someone who loves history and loves learning about ancient Greek history in particular, magnifique, a standout across all of these different opening ceremonies, and it remains one of my favorites to this day. This is one of the ones that I happily rewatch whenever the Olympics come out, and the fact that it's available on YouTube to check out just makes it all the more convenient. And at number 3, we have a new one. Ooh! We have a baby opening ceremony, a brand new entry into the catalogue in the form of the 2024 Paris Olympics opening ceremony that took place just last night. But yeah, yes, it is one of the best of the 21st century. I thought Paris absolutely knocked it out of the park. I loved it spotlighting French culture in such a unique and diverse way through different locations, different performances, different mediums. I mean, hello, from the Minions to Assassin's Creed to Louis Vuitton, like it was a sight to behold. So creative, so innovative, so expensive. Apparently this thing cost 8.6 billion euros. Yeah, that's insane, but it's a good thing that LVMH was on hand to sponsor. But I think they did an absolutely phenomenal job. And side note, speaking of LVMH, they of course own Chaumet, one of the most famous jewelry brands out there, and they have designed the medals for the 2024 Olympics, and those medals look stunning. Those medals look incroyable, okay? But shout out to Paris, they did the whole thing, and even though there were some mix-ups here and there, I mean, that's happened across all of the different ceremonies, let's not forget. So like, yeah, I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park, and that's why they are my current number 3. But then next we get into, ooh, this is where difficult decisions need to be made, because now we're getting into the top 2. And listen, a part of me wants to reward number 1 based off of technical prowess. I mean, you want to talk about logistical impossibilities. The potential number 1 is the definition of that. Like, a part of me just wants to look at it objectively and be like, listen, this was the best one in terms of technically, just in terms of the production, it was incredible. But in terms of storytelling, in terms of heart, in terms of meaning and spotlighting a culture in history, I sway towards the other one. It's tough. And not to mention, I did say before that I'm of the city. So which one do I go for as number 2? And most importantly, number 1? I'm going to be honest. I'm going to put Beijing at number 2. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Listen, okay? No one is saying that the 2008 Beijing opening ceremony was bad in any way. It was perfect, actually. It was perfect. Like, let's be real. But it was just different. Like, it was, the top 2 for me are just so different and have different levels of meaning for me personally. So it's tough. Honestly, they're kind of tied at number 1 in my eyes, but they're very different things. I'm going to put Beijing at number 2 because even though it was a sight to behold, even though it was a feat, an impossible feat that they managed to make happen, I don't have that like emotional connection to Beijing. Like I'm sorry, I'm a Londoner. I'm a Londoner. And so Beijing, of course, was just perfection, a spectacle, the very definition of the word, and the way that it highlighted Chinese culture, Chinese history, the way that it brought us on that journey. It was just incredible. It was so innovative. It was so creative and artistic, and that the whole broadcast was so spectacular and near note perfect. That, yeah, like absolutely, it's a joint first place. Like, it's a joint first place just because of its technical prowess. But at number 1, for me, keeping in mind my bias, we do have the 2012 London opening ceremony. Because, guys, I cried several times. I cried several times. I'm not even the most patriotic person out there, but the way that I was weeping and bawling during that opening ceremony, because let's not forget, we were following Beijing. Like we had a tall order. We had huge, humongous shoes to fill, but we managed to like do the thing. Like to this day, people still talk about the London opening ceremony, and that just brings tears to my eyes. As I mentioned, we had the incorporation of pre-recorded elements, which was a first for the opening ceremonies. We had the iconic James Bond sequence that took place in Buckingham Palace with the Queen, the late Queen, who even made an appearance. And then you had the live production telling the story of modern London from the 18th to 19th century, the Industrial Revolution. And then you had the folks making the Olympic rings ascending, and then like it was insane. It was like GCSE history at a glance, like the whole curriculum the whole curriculum of GCSE British history. But man, was it amazing. I mean, it spotlighted all of these different hallmarks of British culture, from the black cabs, from Harry Potter, controversially nowadays. And then of course you even had the NHS segment. Like all of that just brings tears to my eyes. I am of course a bit too close to the situation to be objective, but I never claim to be objective. This is my video. So yes, I'm going to say that the 2012 London opening ceremony has been the best so far of the 21st century, but really it's a close tie between London and Beijing. I just have an emotional tie to London, of course. It was so close that I could hear it. Like, of course I'm going to be biased. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on the 2024 Paris Olympics opening ceremony, and I ranked all of the opening ceremonies of the 21st century so far, it's time for you guys to let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.